Welcome to week 4 of Intermediate Accounting 1, as well as Chapter 7 out of the textbook. You'll see a nice little change of pace this week. There was only one chapter of content material, but it's still jam-packed information. So as we work towards unpacking that information and learning some of those key concepts, we're focused on cash and our accounts receivable. So as we look at the cash accounts, we look at the cash elements here. Again, we're taking a deeper dive, a more segmented look at the components of that. So what are we talking about in cash? We're talking about petty cash, we're talking about restricted cash, we're talking about sprinkled throughout this chapter, you continue to see references towards the convergence of U.S. GAAP and international standards for accounting. So the textbook will kind of play those back and forth, and what would we do under GAAP, what would we do under the international financial standards. So I have a few questions that are kind of pointed that way even in the homework assignments. So as you work through the other elements of the cash account, we'll also see questions about preparing bank reconciliations, which hopefully is something that you are familiar with either from your professional background or other classes, but also it's brought up here again in this week's unit. So again, what are we looking at? What are we talking about? What are we concerned about? We're looking at the bank balance compared to our general ledger. What are the differences? That's what we're trying to work through when we look at reconciling anything. We want to look at identify the differences, and so then we can address those differences. Do we need to make an adjustment? Do we need to have a correction put through by the bank? Do we need to make an adjustment to our trial balance? What are those differences that we find in reconciling those two records? So as you start to get into the accounts receivable areas, again, back into notes receivable, interest on those notes receivable, discounts on receivables, and how do we adequately disclose those discounts? How do we account for those discounts? Also bad debt, another circle back to the bad debt exposure that a company has with their accounts receivable. And again, what we're doing here is we're trying to form our best estimate. Just like we saw with our completed contracts data in last week's unit, what do we anticipate the total cost to be? That sort of thing. Sometimes our accounting needs to rely on those estimates. We don't have historical information necessarily to record. We have to use that historical information to project our best estimate and use that to rely on when we're recording transactions. That's what we see in our allowance methods for doubtful accounts, is addressing those areas that we need to use those estimates for. Let me just toggle through a few things here. So the notes receivable, the interest, and so the other key thing here is again that convergence topic of international financial standards as well as U.S. GAAP. So some of the questions in the homework you'll see are comparing those two standards to try and show you, just really focus on how are they different. Under U.S. standards, you have one way of accounting for something. Under U.S. or international standards, you do it a different way. And again, the idea here isn't necessarily so much that it's to highlight the differences, sure, but really to gain that understanding that the importance of the standard and the consistency that the standard forms, and having that understandability for the reader and that importance of that for the users of our financial statements. So again, as you continue to work through this week's unit, I would encourage you to reach out with any questions you might have. I'll get back with you as soon as possible through email, through text, through phone calls, whatever you might need to help you try and solidify the course content. Again, I'm here to help, and look forward to seeing your discussion posts related to this week's unit, and please do let me know if you have any questions or concerns about anything as we continue on with the course. Have a great day. Thanks so much.